In 1948, the UN General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This declaration has had a great impact on international human rights law and laws of many countries with different political, economic, and cultural characteristics. In recent years, people in many countries have suffered violence from the state. We do not need the concept of human rights to know and say that these things are wrong. However, we do need a reason to oppose them. If reality violates human rights, why should we side with human rights and not with reality? Ordinary people may sometimes be subject to arbitrary arrest, unfair imprisonment, torture, and murder by the government. The concept of human rights is relevant to ordinary people when the relative security of daily life is lacking or denied. Human rights are most needed when they are most violated. The United Nations introduced the concept of human rights into international law without changing the concept of sovereignty. However, China has often spoken out against interference in its own affairs and those of other countries on human rights ground. International human rights are not a separate foreign policy issue for China. Instead, the Chinese leadership tend to see these issues as ones to be dealt with in the context of global power politics and the pursuit of the country's so-called core interests.
Human rights contains the subjects of legal obligations, and it also represents as a mixture of moral norms with political content and social-cultural implications. In this study, we advocate case analysis as a main method in analyzing the human rights violations in Xinjiang. Due to the limitations of timing and the statistical source of information, the major source of information are derived from news, social media, press, and journal articles in past 5 years. More specifically, we focus on 3 disputable cases in Xinjiang which raised tremendous concerns worldwide in terms of human rights abuses. Forced labor in Xinjiang's automobile factory, boycott the use of Xinjiang's cotton by some Western government and textile firms, and involuntary work in PVC factory. Meanwhile, we use numerical data to support potential statement. Majority of the figures come from the official Bureau of Statistics, whereas others are collected from several interviews with relative respondents. Human rights are defined by United Nations as right inherent to all human beings, regardless of race, sex, nationality, ethnicity, language, religion, or any other status. Human rights include, among other things, the right to life and liberty, the freedom from slavery and torture, the freedom of thought and speech, the right to labor and education, and many others. Everyone, without exception, is entitled to these rights. Since 1945, a series of international human rights treaties and other instruments have added to the body of international human rights law. It's expected to enhance public awareness towards the human rights protection through analyzing the case study in Xinjiang. Human rights protection is obliged to every individual who shares common interests in societal environment.
Let's see the comparison on China's Constitution and Universal Declaration of Human Rights on marriage. Elders in China have historically arranged matches between families, discussing the personalities of possible spouses, and deciding whether or not a marriage should go place. To varying degrees, arranged marriage are still frequent in the countryside of China, and traditional factors are still taken into account when choosing who will marry whom. In the Constitution of People's Republic of China, Chapter 2, the Fundamental Rights and Duties of Citizens, Article 49 mentioned that violation of the freedom of marriage is prohibited. However, in the rural areas of China, there are still people who violate this constitution and choose to arrange marriage for their children. Traditional arranged marriage in which children have no choice in the marital fate are less common in the modern-day China, but Chinese parents continue to be heavy-handed in the matchmaking process. Unlike Chinese arranged marriage, most of Western marriage is decided by both of the couple. The courtship is the first step of the marriage. Usually, the proposal requires some quality and involves the presenting a ring, which symbolizes they get engaged. Once a woman and man decide to go into marriage, they will notice their parents respectively to show their respect. If a wedding date is set, the banns of marriage are announced. This notice is usually placed in the local church or registry office. Move to the topic 2, religion. Since 2017, the Chinese government has reported unlawfully jailed over 1 million Muslims in re-education camps. The majority of those jailed are Uyghur, a Turkish-speaking ethnic minority based in China's northwestern region of Xinjiang. The majority of those held in re-education camps. According to media report, the detainees were targeted for a variety of reasons, including traveling or contacting people from any of 26 countries China considers sensitive, such as Turkey and Afghanistan, attending mosque services and sending texts containing Quran verses. Human rights organizations believe that they saw officers as being Muslim, and that many Uyghurs have been classified as radicals just for following their religion. Many aspects of Muslim life has been erased. Journalists reporting from Xinjiang have found Communist Party members have been required since 2014 to stay in Uyghur homes and report on any perceived extremist behaviors, including fasting during Ramadan. Officials would have destroyed thousands of mosques, often claiming the building were unsafe for worshippers. Halal food, which is prepared according to Islamic law, have become harder to find in Xinjiang, as the local government has launched campaigns against it. Let's see in USA, one of the countries that follow laws and Universal Declaration of Human Rights. There is one of the most well-known debates over the freedom of religion surrounds prayer in school. Since the First Amendment prohibits any official state religion, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that it is unconstitutional to promote any religion belief or practice in public school. That means there can be no school prayer. However, students are free to pray individually so long as they do not disrupt other students. Over the year, federal court has heard many cases about religion monuments on public property, particularly monuments featuring the Ten Commandments. Sometimes the court has ruled the monuments violate the U.S. Constitution because they imply the government is promoting a particular religion. Other times, the court has ruled that the monuments can stay because they have historic value or a secular context. There is at least one Ten Commandments monument on public property in New Hampshire at the Traffic Island in Southward. No one has sued the city over the monuments, although after vigorous debate, the city voted to add a flagpole to the island, allowing local civic groups to fly the banners. In January 2018, a citizen was allowed to fly an atheist flag over the monuments.
Let's compare the difference in terms of personal freedom. According to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights Article 12 and the Constitution of People's Republic of China Chapter 2, the Fundamental Rights and the Duties of Citizens Article 37. Chinese Constitution and human rights in the world express similar views. We all recognize the importance of privacy of individual, of the family home, and of personal liberty. But in the actual implementation process, due to the spread of COVID-19 virus in 2019, some grassroots units in China did not strictly abide by the provision of the Constitution, which led to a series of violations of personal privacy rights and the events of personal freedom, violated basic rights of many citizens. Epidemic prevention personnel in Shangrao City, Jiangxi Province, firstly broke into the patient's home and killed the pet dog of the patient in isolation, simply because of unfounded rumors that pets can spread COVID-19. A middle school teacher in Jiangxi did not wear a mask when running in his community, disputed with epidemic prevention staff. He was sent to the mandatory isolation area in the city for 14 days. Another typical case is in Bing Country, Heilongjiang. A 71-year-old man went for a walk without a mask, disputed with control personnel, sentenced to the administrative detention for 10 days and 500 yuan. There are more anti-epidemic personnel without law enforcement power, beating the humiliating citizens who violate epidemic prevention regulations, and all this without any legal backing. We can understand the enormous pressure on some local government to prevent the epidemic, and good intentions to take strict control measures to contain the spread of the virus as soon as possible. But the justification of the ends does not justify all the means. This point is particularly emphasized by modern administrative law.
Since 2017, Xinjiang forced labor issues have come into the public's view. These forced labor issues were first reported on the external network. The first case is car industry in Xinjiang. A new research from Sheffield Hallam University connects the world's largest automakers to Chinese government forced labor in the northwest Xinjiang area. They reported that since 2017, Chinese authorities have jailed an estimated 1 million Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims in Xinjiang. The dire human rights situation in China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, where Uyghur Muslims and other religious and ethnic minorities face incarceration and forced labor. In response, the U.S. signed the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. The regulation is meant to keep American shoppers from being involved in these abuses by purchasing Chinese items created with forced labor. The second case is Xinjiang cotton. H&M's comments on Xinjiang have sparked outrage. Their reason for boycotting Xinjiang cotton was forced labor in Xinjiang. According to the new data, more than 500,000 ethnic minorities in Xinjiang are compelled to harvest cotton on a considerably wider scale than previously imagined. There is plenty of evidence that it is polluted by human rights abuses, including alleged forced labor among Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslim minorities. China's labor transfer program is ostensibly part of a large government poverty reduction drive, but there is mounting evidence that it targets and coerces Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities in Xinjiang. The third case is PVC factory. A new story in the investigative journalism site The Intercept uncovers the human rights violations and the environmental health dangers inherent in polyvinyl chloride manufacture. Chinese government is accused of waging a massive campaign of repression, incarceration, monitoring, and forced labor. According to Bloomberg on June 14, 2022, 7 large PVC plants in Xinjiang utilize transfer workers, a Chinese euphemism for forced labor of Muslims Uyghurs.
Analysis of Case 1, Car Industry in Xinjiang. There are some documents and reports released by the BBC, which contain measures related to forced labor in Xinjiang and management personnel. For example, car industry, China imprisons millions of Uyghurs, prevent escape, prevent risks, implement unified prison management, and prevent the use of mobile phones to communicate with the outside world, and other dehumanized controls that violate human rights. China's response is that the establishment of concentrated labor skills training camps in Xinjiang is a beneficial attempt, and relevant laws and regulations have been established to protect the rights and interests of working people in Xinjiang. There is also a car factory in China who responded that it has intervened on the spot and there is no forced labor phenomenon. Analysis of Case 2, Xinjiang cotton. Foreign media reported that China forced people in Xinjiang to pick cotton in order to prevent such human rights-free things from happening. BCI boycotted Chinese companies that contain Xinjiang cotton. The Chinese side responded that cotton picking in Xinjiang has been machined, and many places have withdrawn H&M in protest. Analysis for Case 3, PVC factory. Foreign media reported that there is forced labor in PVC factories in Xinjiang, and the toxic substance produced have violated the health of workers. China responded that it has signed a labor safety law with workers, and that the photovoltaics industry in Xinjiang has a good prospect. China claimed that this is the US boycotting China.
Now we come to conclusion and suggestion. First, whether there are human rights issues in Xinjiang is completely uncertain. Although in recent years, many Western countries have reported serious violations of human rights, such as forced labor in Xinjiang, and some even produced conclusive evidence. However, China also refuted it with strong evidence through diplomacy and press conferences. Therefore, under the investigation of a third party and lack of impartial position, no valid conclusion can be drawn on whether there are so-called human rights issues in Xinjiang. Second, the issue of human rights in Xinjiang reflects differences in the understanding of human rights between China and the West. So, why has the Xinjiang issue continued to ferment and debate in recent years? The most fundamental reason lies in serious analysis of understanding of human rights issues between China and the West. The Chinese side has stated on many occasions that it sense of Xinjiang issues in combating violence and terrorism, rather than its so-called human rights and religion issues. In response, the Chinese government has taken a series of measures, such as setting up vocational education and training centers. From the perspective of West, the core of the Xinjiang issue is that series of so-called education and training activities adopted by Chinese government conflict with Western human rights concepts, ideas, and systems, and seriously violates human rights, freedom, and religion of ethnic minorities in Xinjiang. Third, the promotion and protection of human rights is a common responsibility of all countries. Therefore, the concept and standard of human rights should take into account the development realities of countries around the world. The Western world, as a region where human rights practice appear earlier in the world, is a form of human rights, but is not only a form of human rights. Developing countries represented by China should continue to improve their political and economic systems, vigorously promote the rule of law, and use more open measures to increase the transparency of human rights practice. Only when China and the West work together to reduce differences and reach consensus can we promote the healthy development of global human rights cause. That's all from Group 2. Thank you for watching.